And we're back. Welcome to the show. We have the privilege in the hot seat of having Mr. Victor Dalmau, the Managing Director of VW Middle East. We're going to be talking about all things electric vehicles. We're going to be talking about his 20-year history with the VW brand. We're going to be talking about leadership and all that fun stuff. So thanks for tuning in. Let's get ready to rock and roll.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Good morning. Thanks for the coffee. Awesome.
Hi, you're very welcome.
You're welcome.
Victor, we're going to jump straight into it, mate. It's you have a very interesting story. You've been with VW for a very long time. You started out as a trainee, and you're now the managing director here in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Tell us about that story.
It's a long story, and I would say with different episodes. I finished studying engineering in Barcelona. I'm from Spain. And after, let's say, jumping into what at that time possibly I would call a normal job, I decided to travel the world a little bit. So I was in the US, in Australia, I was in London, a little bit in Asia, which for me was possibly the real learning, not that much that one in the university. And I would encourage everyone who can do this, especially the youngsters that they are starting now, to do this kind of stuff. But then back to your question, when I started then with a real job, that was as a technical trainer in the Volkswagen importer in Barcelona, which is the company that imports the car and distributes the car and sales and service the car for the Spanish network. And it was very interesting. At that time I started, I remember my first training was when we introduced the Touareg. So that's a couple of years ago.
Yeah, just a few years back.
And that was very good because actually that's why I started with Volkswagen. It was because of my passion for cars. And motorbikes, but for cars in this case. And I love the technique. I'm an engineer myself. I've always repaired my motorbikes. As we spoke before, I'm into motorbikes. So that was very interesting from a technical perspective. And then, I left. I never was very fixed on a particular journey. There was only one aspect that it was very clear for me, is that I wanted to be abroad. I wanted to do an international journey, and I say journey and not career on purpose.
Yeah.
For me, that was the driver of my decisions on the next stages. Then I moved to different business areas, but then the next jump was when the headquarters, Volkswagen in Germany, asked me to move there to the northern part of Germany, which was also, besides the professional part, was very interesting from a personal part. Also, we got our first kid, Max, that was born there, so he considers himself German when he wants, and when Bayern Munich won, then he says that I'm German, so my team won and not Barcelona. We have a little bit of discussion there. But then from there, the journey was always with Volkswagen, India, then back to Latin America, a short stage in Spain, and now here in Dubai. So,
So question, how did that work? So, there'll be a lot of people there's certainly a younger generation that listens to the podcast that will be looking to map out their journey. Sometimes we talk about entrepreneurship. Sometimes we talk about growth within businesses. People jump between jobs in order to travel the world. You've taken a different route, which is staying within an organization, but taking those opportunities to travel within employment within the same business. How did you find those opportunities? How did that come about?
I think that in larger corporations, like everything has its pros and cons. One of the advantages of a large corporation like Volkswagen is that it is indeed many companies in one. We have 12 brands, we have operations all over the world. So in that sense, it's possibly easier if you want and you express this clearly to the organization that you are willing to move and to have different types of experiences from a content, but also from a geographical perspective. These large corporations facilitate a platform to do that. But I guess that has been my journey. But I guess that's not the only way.
Sure.
But that I always say, I've been 20 years with Volkswagen, and by no means I have the feeling that I need a change, because I've never been doing kind of the same.
Completely different jobs, completely different territories.
I've been changing jobs every 3 years, more or less. So,
What a journey.
Nice. Bringing us back to maybe your journey here in the UAE as well, and with all that diversity in your career, how do you see the love of the automotive industry in different markets? And you also talk a lot about sometimes about the sentimental value of connecting with a brand, right? Connecting with a car manufacturer or a car brand and the story behind that. Have you seen that connection is different in different markets?
Yes, I think that it is different. I think that possibly different markets, and also being in South America, I could witness that very strongly. Different markets at different stages, chronologically speaking, in terms of the emotional relationship with the car. At the beginning of the automotive or decades ago, it was about performance, racing, most of the emotional attachment to the cars. It was on that angle. Now this has been is shifting, especially and in the developed markets, but we still have some markets, and possibly Middle East, I would consider one of them, that they still have that type of emotional connection to the car.
Nice. And I mean, I think with the automotive industry, we've seen the most amount of change in the past, the past 5 years or so. I think it's been one of the industries that had to reinvent itself multiple times. How's that journey been for you, and experiencing that almost like rebirth of the identity and the brand through the EV world, through different products that you guys are trying to push out?
Well, you use one word that I like, rebirth.
Yeah.
Or the rebirth. And that is because the changes that we've been experiencing, we are at the very beginning. That's why I think rebirth is a very good name. And possibly, and having kids, I think I can say that the birth is just the beginning. It is a very intense part, and that's the one that we're living now, because all manufacturers start moving into EV seriously, and Volkswagen is one of the ones leading that change. But it's just the beginning. And all the manufacturers are talking about being carbon neutral, but by 2030, 2035, whenever it is. But the journeys are similar in the end between the different car manufacturers. So somehow I do feel that we are at the stage that, if using then your word of rebirth, that we are learning to walk, maybe, but from here to a post-teenager stage, there is a long way to go, and that's what makes for me very interesting to keep in the automotive business and to encourage the youngsters that possibly they are looking at this spot. If they like it, I think that the automotive industry is a very interesting industry to work for the next couple of decades at least.
It's been very exciting recently. We've been fortunate enough to work with you for a while now. How have you seen the industry change locally over sort of 2019, 2020 through the pandemic, and what we're seeing now in 2021? We know that you've had some significant sales, some new products coming to the market. How's that driven change in the business over the last 2 years?
Okay, in the auto industry, there are cycles that are directly related to the product cycles of a particular brand. We are doing very well. The moment as we speak, Volkswagen in the Middle East, we've launched 4 cars this year, and obviously that has helped. But irrespective of this cycle rhythm that the business has, back to your question on the Corona, like every other business, overnight we had to learn to work significantly different.
Yeah.
We have been forced to make adjustments to the organization, to the way we work, to our financials that were not seen before. And that has been tough from one side, but you learn from difficult times. My personal view is moving forward, I do believe, that's just my personal view, I do believe that the automotive industry will continue to struggle with supply chain related issues. We might get to a phase where COVID will be really almost phasing out or making things easier. We all hope for that, and I believe that this point is arriving. But I do believe also that there are climate change impacts that will continue. We have cyclones here. We have very high temperatures there. That's very
yesterday was the first one, right?
That's why exactly. That's why it came to my mind. That then that will continue to affect the supply chain. So I think that when they say the next after COVID, what could be the next disruption? I think that the next disruption is already here, and is all the difficulties. The supply chain is very fragile. And we always say a car has thousands of parts. If there is one part missing, we cannot sell that car.
Yeah.
and that's where I see the risk.
Yeah, look, I can only imagine the specific challenges that you're facing, both with VW, but the wider industry with the supply chain. We work with DP World, for example, and I think there's no shortage of information out across news channels at the moment with regards to the fragility of supply chains, how we're seeing shipping costs increase coming out of China, the bottlenecks around the world in various ports. On top of that, the energy crisis that seems to be brewing in different parts of the world. I'm from the UK, and we're seeing petrol shortages across the country at the moment, and whether that's we won't get into the details of why that's happening, but it's been interesting to see how all of this is playing out. Certainly how it's going to play out in retail as well because of this supply chain issue. Over the next 12 to 24 months, as you said, I think there's going to be significant upheaval in a lot of those areas that's going to affect all supply chains, all manufacturing processes. So it's going to be interesting to see how the industry navigates that as well.
Yeah. Again, as I said, now it's the semiconductors in the case of the automotive industry, but I don't think that once the capacity for producing semiconductors and chips will be extended, which possibly will happen within 12 months, 18 months to the scale that the world needs it, because the demand for semiconductors has been increasing.
And the backlog is so big now, so it's...
Correct. But I think, as I said before, that will solve the semiconductor issue, but I think that we will continue to have issues because of the fragility of the supply chain overall.
Yeah. And I think, we've grown to be very used to mobility, right? And I think the fact that humans just now, if you think about it 50 years ago, we're okay with like taking one trip a year, but now people are wanting to take 2 trips a month, and they want to be more mobile and have access to multiple options of mobility. And I think that's, that comes at a price for innovation, where we need to almost rethink the way forward. And that's, back to the rebirth, segment. How do you see the future of mobility looking like? And EVs are being one of them, but is there, of course, there's a project that you guys are working on, which is Trinity, that's super exciting for the few years, which are pushing the boundaries. But I think, is there any other direction that you feel would be interesting for the mobility world, and to reimagine how that's going to look like for us?
Plenty of talk points with your question remark. Look, a couple of them that come to my mind. I do believe, and I do agree with you, that maybe we've been too spoiled when it comes to the facility of transportation. Not just thinking about cars, possibly also, but if you look at how cheap and available air transportation has become for us, it is, or at least before COVID, it was very normal in the developed world to take a plane for the weekend, go to Jordan, spend the weekend there in Jordan, and then come back. Now, if you do this once in a while, that's possibly okay. But I personally believe that we've come to a point that we've been too spoiled, and it has become like a normal, but also from a sustainability perspective, possibly that is questionable. Taking other talking points from your comment, I think that one of the things that will change in mobility, besides the electrification that is obvious, but is what we call the last mile issue, right?
Which is very popular at the moment.
Which is very popular, and I think that there are a lot of options that are popping up, and they are sustainable and practical and doable and affordable, and I think that will become very normal, which was not the case before, and that will also be one of the contributors to having a better overall traffic system within the large cities, which is one of the problems.
I think with the last mile mobility, I loved a product called the Boosted Board, which is kind of like electric skateboard, and I was using that, and that was the first kind of like introduction for me, at least, before scooters were very popular and everything else, and to see the shift in acceptability of, it's cool, like everybody is on a scooter now.
I remember you scooting around the marina on one of those things with the coffee. I think our first work chat we ever had.
I had one of them, right?
I was like, what the hell is this guy doing?
It's that mentality, it's that openness to new ideas and new products, right? And it's being okay to then consider that last mile transport being something that's portable, that's smaller.
It's a mindset shift in the mindset of the consumers. It's B2C, it's B2B. if we go back to, I like this this topic around organizational change, mindset shift. VW as a brand, you've been there for a period of time where you've seen a seismic shift in the thinking of the brand, the movement into electric vehicles. Mm-hmm. Can you describe from the company that you first joined and the direction that it was going in to where it's going today, where the whole industry is going today with the movement into electric vehicles, which wasn't even a conversation when you first started with the company, to where you are today, and you're launching multiple brands. We've just seen, from the Munich Motor Show, it's some really interesting direction for the company and the products. Can you describe that mindset shift from within the organization from 20 years ago to where it is today?
Yeah, possibly I've witnessed two sides of the mindset change. One is the one that possibly you are more referring to, that is business-wise. The company has moved from trying to be and achieving it at some point the larger car manufacturer of internal combustion engines. Mm-hmm. That was the target. Beat the other guys.
Be the number one. Yeah.
In volume. Yeah. Two, a vision, a mission, a target, call it as you want, to say we want to be a carbon neutral mobility for everyone, affordable, right? And the Volkswagen Group, with all its brands, from very luxury premium to affordable brands, is possibly in a very good position to be able to offer this. This served then a very noble purpose, if you want, which is to help our planet moving forward, because it's in dire need of that, right? So that is externally, and that is something that you now feel, I guess everyone in Volkswagen feels somehow proud to work for a company that has this mission and this vision. Not the only one, which is good, because Volkswagen on its own will not solve all the
of course.
all the topic, but I think that genuinely people feel proud in Volkswagen of this vision that we have, or this target. Internal and not before, possibly what was there for me as a manager, executive, or employee of Volkswagen, if Volkswagen achieved to be number one in the world. It's good to mention it with colleagues, etc., but that's it, right? So generally there is nothing for the people there. But secondly, the mindset, back to your question on the mindset, is the internal mindset, the way we work. I do believe that now we work in a better way. Volkswagen has done mistakes in the past, as is known. And I do believe that sometimes I say the diesel crisis, thanks to the diesel crisis, Volkswagen is what it is today, and will be where we all believe that will be in the next 5, 10 years. So in that sense, the diesel crisis has been something that has pushed to reshape the company in the way that it needed to be reshaped.
Okay.
Yeah? And that when you work internally, you see the change of mindset internally also.
Nice.
What excites you about the direction that the brand and the industry is going in when it comes to electric vehicles?
Well, that it does good to the planet, ultimately. The transportation industry is the road transportation. So if we exclude the air transportation, it's roughly 10-11% of the carbon emissions. So we are not the biggest player, but a significant player. And Volkswagen having roughly 10% of market share with all the brands globally. So then we could say that we contribute to 1% of the emissions of carbon, which is a big responsibility.
We haven't interviewed anybody from the beef industry yet, so we'll save that conversation.
Look, at least I'm transparent and upfront, right? I try to say things as they are.
100%, and a lot of transparency for in the conversation as well.
No, but I mean, what's the point on hiding? People know.
It is what it is. I mean, those numbers are available, right?
But looking from the good part, then we are in a position to change something.
Yeah.
That will have an effect.
Yeah.
If you are responsible for 0.001, it is important that you do it, like every one of us has individually. It is important that we save energy at home, that we try to live in a way that is more sustainable. But as an individual, your impact into the overall global carbon emission is 0.0001.
Yeah.
But in the case of Volkswagen, back to your point, we do play a role, and therefore that gives us responsibility from one side, and then I think it's a challenge that then we all take it to say we can make a 1% difference in the planet.
Yeah. Well, hopefully 2% at some point.
Or 2%.
Let's dive in a little bit more in the future. And I think, if we were to imagine the road mobility industry and Volkswagen as a brand as well, let's say 10, 15 years from now, what are the technologies, and what are, and you talked a lot about the car being an extension of the house.
Yeah.
If we were to imagine that vehicle, and I read somewhere that you guys are calling it also a time capsule, because it's going to provide you time while there's further automation in autonomous driving, right? So if we have more
just
time,
listening to you to see how good or bad we have expressing,
it's good.
Don't worry,
Okay. So I think once we have more time, I think what's going to happen is the demand for more in that platform, which is the vehicle, is going to increase as well, right? So how do you then foresee the partnerships that are going to fruit from providing more time to people within the transport world and within your vehicles as well?
Yeah, I think that you mentioned it quite well. From one side, autonomous driving. That means that when people are commuting in a car from A to B, at some stage they will be able to do other things than driving, especially the driver, right?
Yeah.
So that opens up a universe of possibilities of how time can be then better used within the car while transmitting from A to B.
I'm sure Facebook and Instagram have a view on that.
Yeah.
Or Google selling ads, right?
Exactly.
So.
Yeah.
As an example. But I would like also to see that people are enjoying their lives then on those times in other aspects, right? That is number one, and that will have impacts in how we on our products, how the cars will be in the next years. There are also, you mentioned it is a little bit of a device on wheel. The car should be part of your digital ecosystem. So there should be a seamless transition for the customer when it moves from home to that car. Just as an example, if watching a movie at home, then you need to move to the car because you need to go to B, then you can continue watching that
film,
movie into the car,
Yeah.
and maybe even the driver because he or she doesn't need to drive, right? So and seamless. That is one thing. Also, the other possibilities that they are opening now is that what we call the digital launch on wheels. We've presented now in the IAA in Munich recently the ID Life concept, which besides being, again, back to my original point, electrical mobility for everyone, affordable, because the pricing will start somewhere at 20,000 euros, which then is affordable for a good part of the society. We are exploring also possibilities of the car being used when you are not commuting from A to B, meaning that car in the parking place could be an extension of the house. Why? Because it has a large screen that can be used, in the windscreen of the car.
Nice.
That can be used for watching movies, for playing games, etc. So could be.
Interesting.
We spoke with a team like in my generation, who has not sit in the car when you were young, with your father and your parents' car, and pretend that you were driving, or just having a chat with your friends in your privacy of that car in the garage or whatever the car was parked, right? So then it's the same concept, but I said professionalized.
Yeah. Amazing. And I think that's what's exciting about the whole movement towards providing more time for people and reimagining the function of the vehicle and what it does as well in our lives.
Moving more locally, what are some of the challenges that are facing the rollout of this? I mean, infrastructure is one of them across the Middle East.
Yeah.
What do you see as some of the biggest barriers to the successful rollout of EVs across the region?
When we speak about EVs in the Middle East, I think that it's very important that then we split the region into the different countries, because I do believe that when it comes to EV, every country will be different.
Sure.
I do think that countries like the UAE, with all the government initiatives, it will be possibly the first one or the pioneer to deploy and to launch the EVs to a larger scale as it is today. I always say the success of the introduction of the EVs depends on three variables. One is obviously the brand has to have the product available.
Yeah.
At Volkswagen, we are ready. We have the products. We have launched it in Europe, in the US, in China, the ID family. So that part from our side is kind of tick the box. However, that is not the only one, because people tend to think, when are you as brand going to launch the vehicle? And then our answer is, we are ready, but is the infrastructure available in this country? And third variable from the three is the customer mindset. It is different to launch an EV from a premium or luxury brand to a more mainstream brand like Volkswagen. And obviously why? Because customers from premium and luxury, it is not the only car they are in the household. They have possibly the possibility of a charging infrastructure at home, which and the usage of that car is for certain particular usage, right? So it's not the only car. And for the whole family, etc. When it comes to mainstream brands like Volkswagen, then those customers need to see that it is a viable solution for them. And even if the brand has the products, even if we have the infrastructure, there is always this hesitancy to say, yeah, it looks, the car is there, different brands have already the products. It seems that there is enough infrastructure, but I don't see many of them, of the EVs. I don't see my friends having EVs. Then the range anxiety, which in some countries it is understandable. In other countries, it is less understandable because really the mileage is always within the city, etc. But again, back to the customer is, rationally speaking, products are there, infrastructure seems to be there, but nobody has them, or just a few guys. So I'm waiting.
Yeah.
And that's the third variable.
Right?
The mindset of the customer needs to be there. And when the three variables are more or less aligned, then it's the right time. Because I don't want as Volkswagen to be the first mainstream brand to launch the EVs. I want to launch it at the right time because I want it to be a success. If you're the first, but then because of what I explained, you struggle. That's not something that you want as a business.
And also, I mean, you end up being, as a brand, you end up paying for the education of the market for your competitors then as well, right? If you're that first mover and you're trying to educate that mass market into reaching that tipping point, because it's going to be a tipping point, right? As soon as I see that 3 out of my 10 friends have it, okay, I'll buy it. But if there's only one at the moment, as you said, a lot of people are in that space where I'll just wait. It makes sense. It ticks the boxes, but I'm not going to do it yet. And, you know, as you mentioned earlier around I suppose the different socioeconomic groups of targeting as well. If somebody's got a villa and they can plug it in every night, then it's not really an issue. Range doesn't become so much of an issue. But if it's an apartment block and there aren't the abilities to plug in and you don't have the facilities, it's a completely different conversation to be had.
But I fully agree with you. It's because the explanation that I gave maybe gave a too pessimistic kind of impression. I think it will be a turning point that then people massively will move to EVs. That's what I believe. Question for us is when do we believe that?
Exactly. It's just market timing, right?
Yeah, correct. That's marketed properly. Yeah,
exactly. Complete change of direction now. One of the things that I enjoy following you on LinkedIn. We're fortunate to work with you and your team and see how you lead and how you operate in business. And I think all of us as business leaders have been tested through recent times with COVID and how we've handled these things. What is your approach to leadership in your organization, and how do you think that's equipped you to deal with the change that you're going through at the moment?
How long we have?
This is the juicy stuff.
I think to the question at the end, what is your view on leadership? I can give you some thoughts. But before that, I do believe that a good leader, you don't learn this in a leadership handbook. So I think that any suggestion, tips on how to be a good leadership, etc., people should take this very carefully. Everyone is different. Everyone acts different. The same person in different environment with different groups will act differently. So I I'm not very keen on these rules, how, good leadership, etc. Now, in my book, and I said my book because everyone will have a different one. I think empathy plays an important role to start with. If you don't know how to connect to people, if you have difficulties to connect with people, then possibly it will be possible, but you will struggle a little bit more. Another variable important for me is to empower people, to give responsibility to people, but really doing this, not just saying it, but doing it, with the consequences that sometimes you would do things differently, but you have to respect the fact that if you give freedom, people will take freedom, right? And that's what it is at the end. Because ultimately you are as good or as bad as an executive as your team is. Difficult to... I said it's a little bit learning by doing, just living it. It's not that I have 5 rules and 1, 2, 3, 5.
100%. I think the major gem for me as well is the fact that everyone's different and people react differently in situations. And a big portion of it is, we hear these self-taught self-help books or self-help speakers about top 5 things I learned and it's very important to take what's relevant to you as a human and to your journey. And empathy is a big one as well that we subscribe to and we center of the way that we like to connect and do partnerships and business with clients and internally as well with the team. And I think having that human connection is super important, and sometimes it goes a lot further than kind of just a very strict business format, partnership, whether it's internally or externally as well.
I think one thing that is worth mentioning now comes to my mind, trust. And also back to your comment on Corona. We've lived times within the last 1.5 years that I think as a leader, if you have been transparent, firm, but transparent to your people, and they trust you, then it's easier to navigate these difficult times. So they are not over. I think trust is a very important component that takes a long way to earn it, but it can take 5 minutes to lose it, right?
For sure, absolutely.
I think that is key.
I think going back to your point around empathy earlier, and we're big proponents of empathetic leadership, and it's how we navigate leadership within our organization and how we try and grow the business. I would venture to say that a lot of empathy comes from experiences in terms of, for example, you've been a leader at different levels in many different countries with many different people in many different ways. Would you say that set you up for being empathetic in terms of how you lead here today, because you have the ability to connect with many different people because of all of the experiences that you've had?
I do believe that because of my journey, I have high sensitivity for where are people coming from. Meaning, yes, culture is one important aspect. Especially
in this market, right? Because every team is multicultural.
Our team, I think it was 30 something different nationalities. That's something that it blows my mind still today. It is one of the super interesting things of Dubai. That really you have the whole planet in one city.
100%.
So you can meet all sorts of different people, and you don't need to get out of the city somehow. I think that is an important aspect that I always try to see where that person is coming from. And coming from means cultural, but also coming from a psychological perspective, what is important for that person, what he or she is sensitive to, what is important for that person, and try to first feel it, know it, sense it, and second, act accordingly. I think that is very important, yes, to put yourself in the feet of the others. I do believe in this a lot. However, to put yourself also on your feet. Because if you overdo it, then you will just do what the others want. And especially in my case, with the role that I have, I need to lead the organization to a certain direction. So at the end of the day, we need to commonly agree on what is the direction. I think the art possibly is to be able to merge and to mix the interest of that person and your own interest. I think it's very important as a leader, if you want one of the rules, is that you know yourself very well.
Yeah.
Because you know what is, what affects you, what doesn't, what you are sensitive to, what is important to you, what is not. It helps you then to acknowledge when you overreacted, when you maybe were too weak with that person and you had to be a little more strict. So knowing your people, it's very important, but possibly as much as knowing yourself.
Very true.
Brene Brown has, in terms of one of her kind of rules, it's quite similar to what you've said there. It's strong back, soft front. And the strong back meaning that you have your non-negotiables.
That's a very good sentence. That's a very good one. Yeah.
That's who you are. So you don't negotiate outside of those non-negotiables. This is who I am. Now I've got a firm back, but it's a soft front to the people that you're dealing with, because as you said, you have to be empathetic to where they're coming from, whether that be cultural, psychological, or any other way. And it's reminded me of that.
It's a good one. Actually, I think that people do appreciate if they see that the boss is clear, that there is firmness.
There's a framework.
Not in the way, but there is firmness in thought, in direction.
Intention, yeah.
I think that gives confidence to people. The guy knows where
we're going.
We're going.
Exactly.
And that is important. And they can say, boss, we can go 5 degrees more left or right or this or that. Important to listen to them. That's why you have a team and say, actually, you're right. Also to correct yourself back to building trust. I think it's important because say, look, this is a guy that listens to us, not just hears, but listens to us. Yeah. And at the end, I try always to make a decision together with the team. Yeah. But that's a very good sentence, actually.
Amazing.
It's a good book.
Yeah.
Dare to Lead by Brene Brown.
Just
read that recently. Yeah, it's really good.
Let's bring it back to, let's say, a person that's interested to join the automotive industry. Somebody who's completely fresh, they're deciding to start somewhere. What kind of advice would you give them?
I'll give one advice, and it is try to identify what moves you, what really drives you. Once you've identified this, and it's not easy, especially when you are 20 something. So it's okay at the beginning of a career if you cherry pick a little bit. You do 6 months in an agency, not for me. You move to another industry, not for me. If you cherry pick several times, it might leave that person to a certain frustration, insecurity, etc. But I think it's worth doing it, and not just staying on the first company, sector, whatever, just for the sake of going up the ladder. I think that you have to find what you like, because you can only be good, really good, at what you like.
Nice.
So that would be my first advice.
Yeah.
And maybe if there's a second one, is don't get obsessed on, getting up the ladder and getting to a higher positions, higher salary. It's not about this life. Life is about enjoying the journey. It's just that when you are 20 something, you don't understand these things. But,
you don't understand until later. That's the problem, right?
It is, but it is like this, right?
100%.
So find what moves you, and enjoy it, and don't get obsessed on certain positions or salaries or whatever.
I think that's a beautiful note to finish the podcast on. Victor, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to have a chat with you. I think you've added a huge amount of value to the listeners as well in many different areas. So thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you.